really pleased to welcome back our colleague, a friend of ours anyway, Adam Wootton from Impact Sales Coaching. Good afternoon, Adam. Good to have you back.
Stephen, it's great to see you. Thank you for the invitation. I look forward to these. They're good fun. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And to our listeners, apologies for being 30 seconds late. I had to go and get my tie just to make sure I'm matching with the high standards that Adam sets every time he joins us. But whilst you're with us this morning, this lunchtime, we are going to be talking absolutely about sales and closing those vital prospects and turning them into customers. The second part, Adam, isn't it? What we started a few weeks ago. Is that right?
Absolutely right. We'll have a bit of a refresh, and we're still staying on the subject of sales presentations and pitching. I'll share some tips and some advice. So yeah.
Brilliant. So lots to listen to. Hopefully you'll get some new tips, ideas and things you can take away after you've had your lunch this Thursday lunchtime and go and pitch and win more business in your organization. If this is your first time of joining us here at Action Coach for these Lunch and Learns, it's great to have you with us. We are broadcasting on 3 platforms this lunchtime. Firstly, we're on Zoom. If you're listening to us on Zoom, please do use the Q&A box and ask any questions. And I'm sure between Adam and myself, our brains will be able to answer them and or at least give you our thoughts and our views on it anyway. If you're listening to us on Facebook or LinkedIn, we've recently started broadcasting on LinkedIn as well. Please do like, comment and share. Put any questions you have in the comments box. If you're back for a second time, if you've come back to listen to Adam more than once, well, absolutely, give us some love, make Adam feel loved and myself this lunchtime. Give us a love heart. And we'd also love to know where you listen to us from. Through lockdown version 1, we went all over the country and international. In this second lockdown, we've been going outside of Birmingham. We'd love to know where our listeners are this lunchtime so we can reach out to you as well. So great, Adam, just to formally introduce you a bit more. So you've been working in Impact for how long now, Adam? How long have you had the business?
We've been going for 3 years. So yeah, helping clients a little bit with their, with their sales strategy, but also if those sales strategies are in place, they're not seeing those conversions. It's having the performance mindset to deal with those objections, as well as the sales training tools, how to close, negotiate, pitching and presenting that we're talking about today. So the whole world of sales.
Yeah. Brilliant. And, you say really importantly there, mindset is a large part of it, isn't it? I'm sure you'll come on to that later on. But, for every one of us and a big BFO, for those of you who don't know, that's a blinding flash of the obvious for me when I joined Action Coach a couple of years ago, is that for any business owner, any senior decision maker in a business, until you have a good number of clients to pay your way, we're all in the game of sales and marketing. And we need to continue to be in that game of sales and marketing because a client is never a client forever. Clients do come and clients go, and we need to make sure we've always got that funnel full of prospects and we're closing them to the best of our ability. So Adam, it's great to have you with us this afternoon, and I'm sure we're going to learn a lot from you. If not anything else, we'll have a good laugh together as we always do. A good way to spend the lunchtime. But Adam's going to come on to sales in particular at the moment. I always share this on my Lunch and Learns. It's just really important, particularly as we think about closing that sale, thinking about where that prospect and where that client might be. Mindset and transition. You've already touched on mindset. We're going to touch on that a bit more, I'm sure, Adam. But remembering where those clients might be and where they're coming from and the changes. You might know a client really well. You might know a prospect really well. And at this particular time, as we're in lockdown, they may be in a slightly different place or a very different place. So I guess the starting point, Adam, it's fair to say the starting point is to understand where or have an idea of empathy of where your client might be coming from, what their journey might have looked like over the last few weeks before you, as part of the preparation, I guess, into terms of going into that sales meeting with them. What are your thoughts on that, Adam?
So, yeah, it comes down to that preparation, making sure that you're ready. And again, some of the tools that we're going to be going through today is going to make sure that you are ready to add value to your customers. Something that you mentioned, Steve, there about the performance mindset type of things. It's being on point in terms of why you're in business. What's your sense of purpose? And then, once you're clear, you can start looking then at the mission, vision, and values of the business that you're in. And ultimately, that will benefit your team. And maybe arguably more importantly, your customers and your prospects are in turn going to pick up on that. And they'll thrive on that. And they'll want to do business with you. You'll be able to create raving fans, because that's what we want. We want a loyal base of customers who want to come back for more and are prepared to stick their flag in the sand and say, brilliant, I can stand for and vouch for Action Coach, for Impact Sales Coaching. So yes, I'd absolutely agree.
Brilliant. So Adam, we've said this is part 2 of our sales, the perfect pitch. Do you want to just, for the benefit of those who may not have joined us last time, just recap very briefly what we covered last time?
Happily do that. If it's okay with you in that case, I will share my screen. if that's
Absolutely
okay.
do. Yeah, no problem at all. Hopefully the technology is working.
Let's find out. It's lunch and learn. This is how.
Having said that, only once have I ever managed to lose one of our guests. I think through they didn't charge their laptop, but generally technology has been our friend in most of these.
It has, and I don't want to be that guy where it goes wrong. So hopefully you can see a presentation slide anyway at the moment. Tell me if you can't. But so don't spend too long looking at part one, but it is important to refresh everybody if they come back for a second time, and also it might help people if they're here for the first time, so you don't feel that you've entirely missed out on things. And so first of all, we need to understand what pitching is, and nutshelled briefly, we need to get into the mindset of recognizing that a presentation, the opportunity for somebody to listen, for you to present to them, is a fantastic opportunity. It's an opportunity to build rapport, to demonstrate that you know what you're talking about, to listen, provide evidence. But of course, your approach is going to be absolutely fundamental. In terms of your approach, we also spoke about housekeepings, control what we can control. And some of this stuff that we're going to focus on today, or this afternoon, approach it from a position of marginal gains. There could be 75% of this stuff. They're like, yeah, cheers, I know that. That's cool. Brilliant. But try and find something else that you can apply, because we're all, our action coach are very similar to me in terms of it's about the application. It's the applied learning, trying these new skills, mixing things up and challenging yourself. And so when we looked at housekeeping there, it's basic stuff. You know, Steve, you mentioned about somebody's laptop dying. So let's make sure the power pack is plugged in, all of these sorts of things. And some can be potentially quite divisive, and I'm not here to be divisive, but having your pets on screen and stuff like that was funny 6 months ago. Where you can control those sorts of things, you know, if it's in a formal sales presentation as opposed to a networking thing, control those sorts of things. So yeah, an interesting point on there, Steve, is, you know, you're wearing a tie today. That's a big deal, and you look really smart.
Thank you, Adam.
And
thank you.
You do. I like a gold tie. I need to get a gold tie. I like that. But also to suit or not to suit, how to dress, you know, what
Absolutely,
to wear.
yes.
You know, these are questions that I don't actually know if there's ever going to be an answer to that in terms of what you dress to your client. But if you dress to your client and they're spending upwards what could be 50% of your revenue, which is risky anyway, but at least you could do is dress smart, even though it's different to the way they dress. So it's being aware of those sorts of things. And with your slides, with your presentation, remembering that 65% of people are indeed visual learners. And
also, you'll be pleased to know, Adam, I've got a note on my front door saying, please leave parcel behind door, so the doorbell doesn't go off.
I love that. Although, funny enough, I was giving training yesterday, and there was a lady in Canada, and I always start my training sessions, is anybody expecting an Amazon delivery? And arguably somebody is, but that's fine if they're a delegate. It's fine. Go and get it, because it's a nightmare if you miss that slot. So, but that's cool.
Yeah.
But also,
not so good if you're leading the training, I have to say, you know.
Well, it's not. If I just got up and walked off now, it's like, yeah, cheers, Steve, you're right. It doesn't work. But of course, it comes down ultimately a presentation of success, or indeed potential failure, comes down to the pre-game. It's being able to invest time in working out what your value proposition is. It's something that I know Action Coach have spoken about, certainly with me when we've done had fun on these lunch and learn sessions before. So start with your pre-game, really invest quite hard into that, and that'll pay dividends for you or a little bit later on. So that was a bit of a whistle stop in terms of what we covered off in the first part. And so now we can look at the reason, arguably, maybe we're here today, and that is for
It amazes me how we stretched over an hour, Adam, to be honest, but we obviously went into a lot more detail.
Completely, yes. And funny enough, when we talk about presentations and things like that, actually timings are absolutely crucial. Stick to those timings. You know, some of the adverse implications of that, because again, by the way, I'm not here to tell you about all the things I've done right. If anything, I'm here to show you all the stuff I've done wrong, and there's a huge catalogue of stuff that I've done wrong, which then qualifies me to be able to speak with everybody, as well as chalking up some sort of success. But when we think about timings, to touching on that point, is you could be one of 3 people who are presenting, and make sure you're able to close down your kit quickly to get back out without frustrating the people who are following you, or indeed the customer if they're on the clock as well. So keeping an eye on timings is a sign of professionalism, and yeah, it's a good thing to do, because you could be eating into your colleagues' time when they're about to come in and present, and they could have something equally as valuable to say, and you could leave them with 10 minutes. So yeah, regularity on that. So we were galloping through this. Brilliant. Openings and journey. First of all, let's take a look at actually how we open and start a sales presentation, or indeed, I would argue you could apply some of this, this learning to any presentation. And it doesn't have to be in the formal sense of a PowerPoint like this, because it can be quite stuffy. Sometimes it could literally be you're sat down with your prospect or a customer, even if B2B or B2C, it doesn't matter. But it's important on how you start that meeting and how you start that kind of presentation. Sometimes rocking up with presentation boards is quite good. Just a notepad, bringing something tactile, the product. If you have something tangible to hold, bring that with you so your prospect can feel it as well. So there's multiple methods, multiple modes, multiple tools for you to use in your presentation. So let's flex those where we can. But in the sense of traditional presentation, Stephen, how
just a thought on what you were saying there, Adam. I'm the worst at it, but if you are in a sales position, don't sit there clicking your pen. If you are holding a pen, it can be the biggest off-put for some, and it will take away all the attention from the good words that you're saying to the pen that you're clicking. So if you're a pen clicker like me, put your pen down.
That is such a good point you've made, because again, that's something I always do, and it's something I'm very mindful of. And so I've got a pen here, and it can be it's a comfort thing. It's
yes.
So if you see people fiddling with their pen, the pen top, or sort of rubbing the side of their neck, or these are comfort things to try and slow us, make us feel more comfortable and at ease with that situation. Mm-hmm. The pen example that you've chosen there, Stephen, is interesting. And it's interesting because it can be very distracting, of course, if you've got a clicky pen, absolutely. For me, I tend to spin the pen around my thumb. It's this cool little trick, and it's a bit annoying for people who watch. So I put my pen down. But also the third observation, and I think is really important, is if you're holding a pen, like I am now, purposely, you can end up pointing at people with your pen when you're presenting. And
absolutely, yes,
it could be a little bit passive aggressive. Yeah. And so yeah,
but I digress, Adam. You were going to ask something else, I think, weren't you?
No, this is great. This is why we have a chat. This is the lunch and learn. The content, the value is there, and it's great that we go off piste with these sorts of things.
Absolutely.
But yes, in sense of the and it was linked to presentations as well, so that's cool. But in terms of opening, Stephen, in your experience, if you're opening a presentation, doesn't necessarily have to be sales, of course, but we're all sat here, we're a captive audience, we're waiting to hear you speak. How would you open that presentation, Stephen?
From my own experience and what I would do, Adam, is I would certainly set expectations in terms of what we're going to be doing in the next hour. And then ultimately highlight that what we want to do at the end is come to an agreement about the next steps, whether that's the next steps of working together or whether it's right for you, whether it's not right for you, but certainly set expectations that we want a decision of some kind at the end of the meeting.
Fantastic. Yes, everybody listen to what Stephen's just said. Completely right. There's potentially no right nor wrong way, of course, but that's a really effective way. But even if we take a step back before we go to open that presentation, and I still do this now when I'm delivering keynotes or whatever else, it's a little thing, but I've put on the slide here, breathe, you got this. But what I'll actually put on top of my notes, because I always have presentation notes with timings and things like that. Again, it's about standards, but I will write breathe at the top, because sometimes our adrenaline kicks in.
Yes.
And we can sometimes blast through a point that actually you really want to make stand out. And also by making sure that you're breathing and really controlling your breathing before you begin the presentation, it just settles your heart rate. It's good for your brain. You start to, I guess people will call it, sort of being centered. Just gets you down. You're level, you're ready, you're good to go. And continue to practice that breathing. Because, and I'm just the same, I'm an excitable, chipper kind of chap, and I like to get going and things like that. But at certain points, it's good just to breathe and just slow things down a bit. So
indeed. James, I've got a question. Adam, I've got a question from James. Get my names right way around. James is saying, in the world of Zoom, would you adapt your opening in any different way from doing it face to face?
Yeah. What's great, it depends on the format, of course, but Zoom is an absolutely brilliant tool. I think it's here to stay. I think it'll be blended in terms of face-to-face presentations and supported via Zoom. So the openings that we're going to go through here, you can use on Zoom, but where you can do something a bit different with Zoom is when delegates are, depending on what it is and who you're presenting to, but when they're waiting, you could put, one of the things I've done before is I'll put a map of the UK up on the opening title slide, and I'll ask people to drop pins on where they are in the UK, because while they're waiting, I want to get that engagement going. And when you're presenting on Zoom, you do have to work a lot harder. There's a whole course on this sort of stuff. You need more, it takes more slides because the level of interaction needs to be higher, because you need to be able to keep the attention of the audience that you're talking to. We don't want people sloping off, turning off the camera, looking at their emails and things like that. And so it's how you facilitate that. It's important that you set those expectations out right from the start. So interactive whiteboards, graphics that people can type onto, running polls where you can, of course, using the function of breakout rooms, maximize all those opportunities that you've got, because it is quite hard to keep attention. And I think that also comes down, sorry, Steve, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to agree. I think that is often the challenge when, you and I could be sitting here now and, one of us, either of us, I'm sure we're not, but could be checking our emails, checking our Facebook, and that's a challenge when you're on Zoom in this virtual environment, is people tend to do things that perhaps they wouldn't be doing in a face-to-face meeting. I've seen so many situations where people have picked up the phone, or just, I can see them texting, or they're perhaps doing something else on the computer. You can almost tell within a few minutes that they're not fully engaged in what you're saying. So it is a challenge, isn't it? Absolutely, the one that we need to, and I like your points about, making it more interactive to keep people engaged, or keep going back to asking the questions to keep that conversation two ways.
Completely that, absolutely right. You'll get a sense of sometimes people that don't want to engage because perhaps they're not comfortable, and that's absolutely fine. But if you fire out a question to somebody who's been particularly quiet, if you get something back, brilliant. And then in the break, you could give that person a call or whatever you need to do. What's also great about, if you have the resource, of course, which sometimes I don't, but if I'm doing a presentation on Zoom, the Action Coach team here have got the support. And what am I getting at? So you've got the host, which is Stephen. Stephen's running this session. But then Stephen is always supported by a facilitator or co-host in the background that can help to manage the chat logs, those sorts of things, keep an eye on the different platforms, any technical issues, those sorts of things. It's great to have that support there, because if something should happen, and hopefully this won't, where Steve's connection dies, well, then your co-host can jump in and support. So it's a little bit of housekeeping stuff, but equally, very, very powerful. And this is something I don't do, but it's something I'm going to look into, is I believe it may be on Zoom or one of the other web conferencing tools, is where you're delivering your presentation, a little red flag will appear next to somebody's name if they've been inactive or if they're on a different screen, which is great in my world. It's like, I know you're not paying attention. So I'm going to flippantly throw out a question. So there's Zoom is a fantastic tool for that. Of course, it will never replace face-to-face, but it also has got benefits, but you need to work harder.
Indeed.
And so when we think about the openings, what we're going to cover off now are things that you can use face-to-face, and absolutely you can use those on Zoom, B2B, or indeed B2C. Stephen, your example of setting expectations, absolutely, and the next steps, I would encourage arguably that that's best practice and something that we should all be doing where we can. So I've got 3 suggestions on there. You've got the conventional opening. And there are a number of sort of micro and SME businesses that I see who tend to follow that because it's quite safe. And when it's a conventional opening, you'll have a pretty title slide, a sort of introductory cover with a lovely graphic of your logo and hopefully the client's logo and bits and pieces on there. And then you'll move straight into an introduction and then maybe the objectives of the presentation, and then you'll move into the content of the presentation. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly acceptable, but could you do something a bit differently? You may be the fourth, fifth, second, who knows? You may not be the only person who is due to present to this audience today. So by doing something a little bit different, it might help your customer or future customer prospect to remember you. And so that's where I'd encourage people to toy around with and almost make it best practice is to come up with the alternative open. And as Stephen rightly said, the alternative open is once you've got your pretty graphic up of your logo and whatever, you go into and say, so everybody, good afternoon. By the end of our time together, you will have learned, dun, 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 dun. Our expectations are A, B, and C. So, good afternoon. My name is Adam. I'd like to talk you through our session. So when you do your introduction and alternative opening, you don't even give your name. You just go straight into what the output, what the outcomes are going to be. And so if your prospect or customer, you know full well that they're going to want to talk about price, delivery, maybe some of the legal framework type of stuff. Signpost that at the start. So during our session, these are going to be the outputs, and these are going to be the next steps. Then use the 6 forms of verbal communication. So, speed, pace, pitch, tone, accentuation, volume, silence. Use all of those, put a pause in, and then say, good afternoon. My name is Adam. And then you work through your presentation. It's a very subtle, minor, minimal change, but it will make a difference. And also you'll feel a lot more comfortable, and I don't want to say professional, but you'll feel good about it. So, yeah, that's a bit different. It's a bit more informal, a bit more conversational. And so, God, sorry, Steve, I thought you were going to say something.
No, I'm waiting to hear what you say about shock, because I've got an example that I still think of now, 10 years later, but you go for it.
Cool. If it's stuck with you 10 years later, we definitely need to discuss it. And the shock, so alternative is good. The shock is where you do shock the person. So there was I didn't do this, but there was a colleague of mine was pitching into the cosmetic retail industry. And she put on a picture of what was essentially a massive picture of a naked bloke, and he was covered up in the important areas, I suppose. But by opening up your title slide with a picture that's so graphic like that, so visual, they were like, "Whoa, that's different. That's brave." And so sometimes just sparking their interest straight away like that, well, that's very different. That's different to the traditional format. Whatever you can do with those sorts of things is going to, again, help you. But I'm intrigued, Steve. What was the shock opening that you saw?
It wasn't a sale. Well, I guess every job interview is a sales pitch, isn't it? And you're selling yourself. But I was on the recruitment panel, and we were recruiting. Let's say it was 10 years ago. And the candidate came in and gave each of us a balloon. And as she taught, she asked us to blow into the balloon. I think hers burst. I'm not sure to this day whether that was deliberate or not. But it's certainly, as she was talking about adding value and, what she could do and etc. But the idea of just having something a bit quirky, a bit different, I'll never forget that interview, because she came in with something very different to present. And yeah, it's just stuck with me. So I think, whether it was a good idea or not in terms of, adding to her content of a presentation, it's certainly that interview has stuck with me for 10 years. Because it was so different.
There's real power in that. And that's a really good suggestion, Stephen, in fairness. And I think it's when you know who you're presenting to, you sort of know what you can get away with and what you're presenting. So I wouldn't expect my accountant to give me a balloon. If an accountant was pitching for my work, I don't know. But it's getting that balance right and knowing your audience. And one of the things that I've done relatively recently when I've delivered training is I want to try and establish a connection. And admittedly, my kind of presenting, this is going off the rails in terms of sales a little bit, but I'll ask selection of the delegates, either lucky dip or all of them, depending on who's there, to just explain what's on the front screen of their phone as their wallpaper. And invariably, there can be a bit of a story there, and it just gets conversation going. People loosen up a little bit. Yeah. When we think about... Sorry, Steve.
No, Zay, I think with shock that you've hit the nail on the head, Adam. I think it's a fine line, and you really have to know your audience, and whatever you're doing, you have to be able to carry it off with confidence, because it can be the biggest, memorable part, but it can also be the biggest flop or the biggest risk in any presentation, whether it's an interview, whether it's sales. I think you've got to know what you're doing and make sure it adds value to the content that you want to get over. There's no point having a balloon if you're selling bricks. It's it's making sure that you've got content that relates to the message you want to get across.
Yes, precisely that. And so for everybody that's taking part this afternoon, there's 3 things that you can try there. I would say for maybe the safest and maybe stretching a little bit would be go for the alternative. Think about your next presentation and think about changing how you start and use the alternative open in that instance. But of course, that takes time. It takes experience, of course. So we know how we're going to open our presentation. We're good to go. Now it's a case of, right, oh, blimey, we are actually now presenting. It's now that journey of, right, okay, let's keep this all on track. And so these are just some of the points that tend to come up from time to time. And again, some of this stuff is good housekeeping, but sometimes we can forget in the throes and in the heat of the moment that when we are presenting. So the first one is, maintain eye contact with the people that you're talking to. And on Zoom, that can be quite a challenge because I'm looking at you right now and I'm looking straight at the camera. Mm-hmm. But of course, my eyes will go around other delegates or will go around the presentation slide. But where you can, try to maintain eye contact, and never more so when you're face-to-face actually working with people and presenting to people. Also,
just on that point, Adam, a top tip for me is if you're using more than one screen, make sure you know which camera on which screen you're using and look at that camera. Because I have seen so many people who are talking like this and they're looking at their presentation like this and they're not looking at the screen at all. So just make sure, just a small tip, but if you are using more than one screen in Zoom format, look at the right one.
Brilliant. Yes, absolutely. That's why it's good to, nobody knows everything. It's good to volley ideas around. That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
And gestures are important as well. And I haven't got too much time to go into some of this stuff, but use your hands. And there's a space about here when you're presenting. You'll see sports, well, anybody who's presenting on telly, there's this kind of box around this sort of area. Keep your hands in that box, either together or when you're presenting, those sorts of things. Also, as a side point, when we're looking at gestures, sometimes if you're standing to present, which is my preferred method, the reason I'm sitting down today is because I twisted my ankle on a run because I'm brilliant and really fit at running. Apparently not. But is be mindful of if you're pacing left and right, or you're rocking, I should say, you're rocking left and right. That can be, you don't know you're doing it, but it can be really off-putting. And I remember when I first started at sales years ago, I was doing that and I didn't realize there's a squeaky floorboard under my left foot. So every time I was doing my comforting rock, I was squeaking on the left foot down. So be careful when you're doing those sorts of things as well.
I think the other one, Adam, just to add to that is people, on Zoom will often do this. And that can look disinterested, so again, just think about your body language.
Totally right. The only time you can probably or maybe get away with that is if you're mirroring the person that you're dealing with. And so if through effective questioning, consultative based questioning, you've identified that there's a real pain for this prospect in a certain area, whether it's stock availability, and you can see the prospects, stock availability and pick accuracy is a real challenge for me. If you go, I can understand that, and this is how we can potentially help you with that. That's okay when you're mirroring. So it's a fair observation that, and again, it takes experience and time to become comfortable with this stuff, because if you were to roll out everything, the great advice that Stephen, and I know that Glenn's on the call maintaining things behind the scenes, but if you were to roll out everything that the team at Action Coach have told you, if you were to roll out everything that I can share with you in one go, you're going to forget who you are. You're going to get conflicted and confused. So it's about applying these things gradually. The other classic is around, do you invite questions, or do you say wait for questions at the end?
What would your advice be on that, Adam? Is it reading the situation, or does one work better than the other?
So if you're in a sales context, in a sales presentation, there's an allocated time for that meeting. Your objective, minimum objective, is to leave a professional impression and to manage the time effectively. There will be other objectives in terms of next steps. So to maintain that level of professionalism, to hit those times, I will ask the client right out of the gate, what would they prefer? And explain to them the implications of their choice. Because if they ask a question that's quite emotive mid your presentation, well, then all of a sudden you could have lost 10 minutes, 15 minutes of your presentation time before
Absolutely.
you've got to the key point that you want to get across later on. So when I say agree up front, that's exactly what I mean. Offer it to the client. And if they say they're quite flexible, well, in that case, what happens is if you've got somebody with you, your wing person can make a note of any potential questions that might come up or have come up that he or she can make a note, and we can address them at the end. But it's really important we agree that at the front end, because your time's valuable and absolutely your customer prospect time is valuable as well. But it's being confident enough to explain the implications if they do ask questions. So,
I think that's a great point, Adam. Of course, all your points are great, but a question can really derail a pitch and a presentation. As you say, if it can go off on a tangent and you don't then get to your key points or get to all of your key points you want to make in the time you've given. So, yeah, worth bearing in mind.
Yes, and again, I share this because we all present very, very well here, but I've done it wrong before. And there was 7 of this client in front of us. They had all sorts of decision makers there. The presentation was being recorded on an iPhone. It was very, very formal, and you had your time limits. And my operations director, who was supporting me, just kept going into other areas outside of the presentation topic, eating into our time. And when we got to the end of our time, I barely finished my close. And they said, okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that. If you could close down, leave materials and leave. So, be careful on that in terms of questions, which then also links onto that third point around tracking your timings. Comes down to the housekeeping that we spoke about before as well. So again, when you introduce your presentation, it's sometimes quite good to reaffirm those or confirm those timings for the time that you're due to spend together, but also within your presentation practice, 10 minutes for this, 5 minutes for this, 15 minutes for that. Really work on those details. This is one of those instances where I don't necessarily always agree with sales scripts, although they do have their value, definitely. But in a presentation, it's a lot more restricted. You are in control. That person's asked you to present, so you can control the flow to some extent. The other point there is know who's in the room. It's not always possible, but you should always try and seek that out. Who is in that room, in the Zoom room, or who you're presenting to? The benefit of that is, of course, understanding what their responsibilities are. So if you're presenting to a panel of influencers or decision makers, are they HR? Is that one person the HR director, the commercial director, the managing director? Understanding that will allow you to balance the content of your presentation to hit the salient points that matter to those individual people, because they will all have their own measures of success, their KPIs, their SLAs. So really have an idea and ask in advance if you're not sure.
I think just adding to that, Adam, again, the examples you may use in your presentation, the way you respond to your questions, if you're selling a bit of back office software and you've got an HR person, you want to give examples that relate to HR. If you've got the finance person, you want to give examples that benefit the HR team. It's about using the right examples and the right anecdotes in the meeting, in your presentation. Absolutely right.
That's the foundation of consultative, exceptional selling. Anybody can copy and paste a presentation and just roll it out. That's not particularly effective. But if you tailor your presentation to the brief, and then you tailor the presentation to what you know about the people in the room, well, now all of a sudden, that's very, very different. That's a different league of sales professionalism. And sales is a craft. It is a profession. It's not something that I personally don't believe that somebody can be born a natural salesperson. It's not something I personally believe, because it takes time, it takes experience, and it takes coaching to really maximize that. You can have a good foundation, but there's going to be areas to improve. The next point comes down to confidence. And that's having the confidence to employ one of the S's in the 6 forms of verbal communication, and that is silence, particularly to get your points across. But moreover, has that person that you've specifically targeted that comment at, have they got it? Look at their eyes. Are they making notes? Has it landed?
You take me back to my childhood memories, Adam, there. And my twin brother was always a master of using silence in an argument with me. And he'd always stop and pause, and I would always fall into the trap. and say something perhaps I regret, or say something and there, yeah, it's the power of silence is really phenomenal in the sales environment, in any environment. If you want to get to a conversation, don't waffle on, give them an opportunity.
Yes, absolutely right. Because even though I'm a sales professional and I run a professional sales training company, at the end of the day, I should only be talking for 20% of the time. I should be asking fact-finding, benefit matching, need identifying types of questions to really get to where the value is. So when you think about a sales presentation, of course, you're going to be talking more, but allow your points to land. Use that silence. Linked onto that is then tunnel vision. We sometimes think, right, I've got 45 minutes. I'm going to open up the laptop. I'm just going to drop the shoulder and they're just going to get both barrels. Well, actually, how effective is that really going to be if you've made the time to understand, or as best as you can, looking at body language, signals, something called verbal nods, when somebody goes, those sorts of little cues, the leaning forward, the making of notes, and all of these kinds of things. You also need to have the ability to listen to pick up on those things. And so if you're so focused on your presentation through excitement, through nerve, through whatever it is, you are potentially missing that bigger picture.
Absolutely right. That's good. Good points, Adam. Thank you.
And let me just check something, actually. We're all right for time. I'm funny about time.
Don't worry, I'm tracking time here, Adam, and I would certainly slow you down or hurry you up accordingly. But we've got another 20 minutes yet, so don't rush.
Oh, easy, love it. And also, pitching or presenting, much like this is a presentation, but hopefully you feel actually it's a little bit presenting, but it should just be a conversation. And what I'm doing on Zoom on here right now is, of course, I'm relying quite heavily on the slide. Because in reality, in a different context, if this was a sales presentation as opposed to an educational format, I would have fewer points. I wouldn't be reading off the slide, those sorts of things. And if you chuck up a whole paragraph of text and you're stood there and you're reading that, that's not effective use. PowerPoint is a tool. These are all tools. People should be listening and focusing on you and not the PowerPoint slide.
And to take that one step further, if you have the opportunity to move away or complement PowerPoint with a flip chart, with something else, some other way that gives you additional credibility, that your stuff, you're not relying on things being prepared earlier, not doing your Blue Peter pitch, but you've got something up here that you can share, I think just helps to give you credibility in the room.
It really does. Absolutely right, it does. And so points on your slide, they are just points. It's points to sort of motivate or inspire the person that you're presenting to, but also, much like a sales script, it's your get out of jail free card. We are all human. I wasn't born being able to sell and present at the highest level and whatever else. We're all human. We get brain fade. And if we just casually turn around and you can feel yourself going into this cul-de-sac of, I've got no idea what I'm saying next, being able to just quickly look at that slide brings you back on track.
Just also, on that point, Adam, a question from Simon. He said, is there a perfect ratio for slide to minutes of the presentation?
No. It really is about the brief. The only way that ratio there is no standard format. The only way that ratio would change is hopefully, Simon, you would have spoken, potentially if it's open to you, the person you're presenting to worked out what matters to them. Are they really heavily interested in commercials, which is going to represent your gut feel 75% of their decision making? Well, okay, you can go a little bit harder on that. So it's being able to read the opportunity, read the person that you're presenting to. So there isn't a set format. Sorry, Steve.
No. Just thank you, Adam. Hopefully, Simon, that's helped answer your query. It's good to have the questions coming in. Thank you.
If you've got the opportunity to present, it's because you can add value in some way. Somebody's identified that, whoa, Simon, I need you involved to help me with this opportunity, with this problem that I've got. And so you would have been asking questions about, okay, so what problems are you seeing at the moment? What would good look like for you? What's your decision-making process? These sorts of questions will help you structure that presentation. And it's important to have the confidence to go back and seek clarification if you don't know those things, because then otherwise you're presenting cold like everybody else could be. It's good to try and go that one step further.
Adam, a question for me. What's your view on sending sort of pre-work to or information to your prospects beforehand, maybe a video or a short presentation to engage them before they get to the meeting?
Absolutely critical. If it's something that is acceptable, which in more cases it is than it isn't, what I would do before a presentation, and you're absolutely right, Stephen, is I would record a video. It's 10 seconds. Send it on an email. The video is, I'm looking forward to seeing you next Tuesday morning. And it's basically a video of the agenda. Use your alternative opening, and then let me know if you need anything in the meantime. It's great to get that engagement. Similar to when I take on new clients, I don't just take them on. There's that evaluation of both of us. I'm evaluating them. Are they ready? There's pre-coaching questionnaires. Where you can, it's good to warm up to your presentation. Can you add those people once you've identified who you're presenting to, if it's a team? Can you add them on LinkedIn? And if you haven't got their email addresses, but you can find them on LinkedIn, great functionality on LinkedIn is to record a video message on LinkedIn and send them that. There are definitely ways to do that. And it's great to do that, because any opportunity you can get to get in front of your potential buyer is absolutely critical, because it helps with the rapport building side of things, eases them in. They already know what you sound like, what you look like. That's the benefit of technology where it is at the moment. And then finally, on that slide here, we mentioned about the 6 forms of verbal communication, but it really is being able to regulate your pitch, your tone, your pace, how you accentuate certain words, the speed, the silence, these sorts of things. Use all of those tools. It takes, again, confidence and experience, but use those to get those points across. You may have noticed as I'm presenting or going through bits, sometimes I'll inject a bit of humor, or I'll steamroll into something. But then I'm not afraid to use silence and to retract and mix these things up. It's about effective communication. Cool. How are we on for time, Stephen?
We've got another 10 minutes, Adam.
Cool. Okay. So quick wins. This is my final slide. Some great pointers for us to consider when we look at marginal gains. Use this as a checklist if you need to. Avoid jargon, unnecessary acronyms if those feature. Of course, you can use industry and trade terms that everybody knows in your industry. That's not jargon, that's relevant. But don't assume people know what you're talking about. If I'm talking to a videographer and she's explaining to me about this amazing piece of kit and all these numbers and letters and stuff, it's like straight over my head. Keep it simple. Think about the person you're presenting to. Third point, use green ticks. Green means good. Subconsciously, we think green's great. So if you then use green ticks, well, all of a sudden it's like, okay, that must be really good. It's green and it's a tick. So if you're making points on your slide, green ticks for the win. Again, less is more. We've covered that in terms of slide structure. Good, powerful tool is to use images of your service, your product being used in its actual form. We don't always need to use high resolution, smiley American people doing whatever it is. Actually, let's get somebody using, or you presenting to an audience, have something that shows your product or service being used. Commitment slides, a commitment slide is also very powerful. That's a slide I would normally end my presentations with. So my commitment to you is this, Mr. and Mrs. Customer. But equally, the commitment I expect from you are these. And again, I'll put these in green ticks. That could be payment terms, order fulfillment, minimum volumes, the amount of contact, whatever it needs to be. Commitment slide is particularly important. Ensure you're highlighting key features, use graphs, mix up the slides, leave handouts, but don't get too carried away. That links into the next piece here around leaving samples. Check in advance if it's acceptable to leave examples. I used to sell catering services, amongst other things, in terms of the FM industry. And I said to one of the head chefs, I'd like you to bring in some samples. This is what I'm looking for. The chef went crazy, wheeled out this huge trolley full of food for 2 people we were presenting with. It was too much. So check in advance, and it's quite nice to leave something behind when you're allowed to. Close, seek action, seek commitment, hence the commitment slide, and be ready to set up and put your kit away as quick as possible, because it's just clunky and awkward where you're trying to click start, shut down, and everything. Just close, get out, and regroup in the Costa around the corner if you can. So,
couple of questions, Adam. Firstly, Claire was just saying about the use of testimonials. At what stage would you use a testimonial, either before the meeting, during the meeting, or follow it up as a follow-up a few days later? So where would you see testimonials fitting into your sales process?
So social proofing is a really great effective sales tool. I'd use it beforehand and I would use it afterwards. If you put it into your presentation, again, context depending, what you're actually doing is just eating into your presentation time. And is it something that the brief has asked for? Have they asked you to explain about your business? Have they asked you to provide a testimonial in that presentation? In the follow-up, in the warm-up to the presentation, by way of engagement, you can send it. As part of the customer journey, you can send it. And you can send it afterwards in terms of, great to meet you, this is what we learned, here are our commitments, here's our proposal, and you can attach a case study to that. So I wouldn't necessarily use them in a presentation unless I've been asked for it.
And my other comment or question for you from myself, Adam, is the importance, I think, of pitching at the right level. So doing your research beforehand, but then in the meeting, I'd love to hear your views on this. If you can sense that sort of, not quite biting, or that, they're deliberating, or you've not quite pitched it, don't be afraid to downsell rather than walking away. I don't know, what's your view on that, Adam?
So are you asking there, Stephen, in terms of you've presented and you're not sure that they've either understood or their motivation for buying has decreased? Is that what you're suggesting?
Their ability to buy at the level you've pitched hasn't been quite matched. So rather than walking away and losing a customer altogether, do you then refrain your pitch and say, well, actually, okay, Adam, our coaching at this level isn't quite, we feel that you'd be at best at this, but I can understand where you are at the moment. So perhaps we start here, and you downsell with the view of being able to upsell later rather than walking away.
Get people onto the product ladder. Absolutely.
Yes.
So you set objectives before you go into a sales presentation. You need to set 3 objectives. This is what I coach my guys on. What's your number one thing you want to get out of that meeting? I'm discounting, of course, professional impression and all of this stuff, credibility. That's a given. But what do you want to walk away with? Is it a deal? If it's not a deal, then maybe it's a deal in 6 months. Let's agree that. Or could it be a deal in a year's time? Or could your measure of success be, actually, we've learned a bit more. And from our experience, having the confidence to say this, from our experience of what might be right for you based on other people we work with, we actually think this could be a better fit for you, or the perfect or the right fit for you right now. But it takes confidence to do that. It almost feels like you're answering a question with a question at some point. But that's where confidence comes in, and that's what your prospect is going to pick up on, because you've got their best interest at heart.
Brilliant. Thank you, Adam. And we've got a couple of minutes left, Adam. So I just want to ask you, in terms of some of the best closing lines you've had and some of the worst you've heard of. I'm sure you would have used them yourselves, but, in terms of, you're getting to that decision-making point at the end of that half an hour sales meeting, what are some of the better phrases to use, and what would you want to avoid, or what have you avoided in the past?
Gosh, the first thing is the failure to close. I have seen this.
Said to me, Adam, ABC, always be closing. I think you said to me last time, didn't you? There we go.
Absolutely.
It's gone in.
I love that. But use it with caution. There's a movie called Boiler Room that was out years ago, where it's important that we all understand the difference between transactional and consultative-based selling. Consultative relationship-based selling it takes longer because you're asking engaging, fact-finding questions. Whereas transactional selling is a case of, how many do you want? When do you want it? Done. You're just closing and qualifying constantly. And the old school way of selling, probably I would suggest 70% plus of that time was spent closing. Close. That's not looking after and maintaining modern buyer, modern customer expectations. But you should always be aware, ABC, always be closing, in the sense of next steps, continuation. So that's why that's important. In terms of actual closes, I mean, I know there's 8 on my little form that I've got here, and they're absolutely brilliant. You need to use what you're comfortable with. And I think, first of all, it's being clear if it's a confidence thing, which I do know affects some people, and I understand that. The confidence to really ask for the close, to go for it. To sort of, before I give you some examples, it's important to understand that to go for a close, it's something that you are entitled to, which is a big statement because it could potentially sound a bit passive aggressive or arrogant, but it's not. If you've invested time with somebody through that whole customer journey, time, resource, everything else, you've informed them, you've gone through that journey, you're now entitled to ask for the business. Equally, the close doesn't have to be this huge, big deal. If you look after your customer journey well enough, the close is a byproduct. They may even just say, great, what are next steps? Because you've asked all those right questions throughout that customer journey. And other thing to consider when we think about closing, particularly if some of us are nervous again, is think about the implications of not closing. It's something that comes up quite frequently. And of course, Steve, have a guess, what are one of the implications of not closing at the end of a sales call?
The implications of not closing, I think you lose the opportunity to.
Exactly. You could miss out.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, a top tip I was told many years ago was always walk away with something. That might be, an opportunity for another meeting. It might be the opportunity to link in. It might be, it might not be what you wanted to go in with, but go away with something. Go away with an opportunity to continue that relationship in some form.
Yes, and that's why when we said earlier on about set 3 objectives, 3 outcomes, the reason for that is you've got your number 1 objective. You're fairly comfortable you're going to walk away with the deal, whatever it is. But then mid-meeting, something's changed. The customer or the prospect, I should say, has shared something with you in terms of their buying motivation has shifted. A competitor's now involved. Maybe the decision maker has left the business and there's a new stakeholder that's now part of the evaluation team. Your number 1 objective of that deal is no longer viable. Doing that prep work in advance means you can quickly switch into, right, okay, that's off the cards, but I know what my second objective is going to be. So you can quickly regroup as opposed to taking the loss there and then and walking away with nothing. So yes, equally, when I mentioned about the implications of not closing, of course you're right, Stephen. It's the loss. You potentially lose a deal. I would also sort of recommend 2 other things, 2 other considerations to have in mind is the failure to close, in addition to losing the business, could be you've then educated, informed and primed your prospect ready for when your competitor comes in. And then your competitor could take that deal straight from under your feet. Hopefully that wouldn't happen, but that's a potential. And then the third consideration about the failure to close because of confidence or whatever it is actually a case of damaged trust. You've gone through that journey. You and the prospector getting on really well. All about his or hers family, and about the solution that you can offer to fulfill their need and their pain. But then they're waiting for you to say, can I have your business? By not doing that, your prospect could, this is scare tactics up to 12, so forgive me, but it just provides an example. But they think, actually, do you know what? I've gone through all this journey. I don't trust this company that you can deliver because you haven't asked for the business. I think there's a potential where you've oversold this and now you're not comfortable, and they could start to lose respect and lose trust in you, which is hugely, of course, hugely damaging. So quite a bit there on closing in terms of those are the implications. And I'll share some examples. I've got my document here, some example closes. So the classic one that gets thrown around is something called the assumptive close. So the assumptive close in this example could be, we've worked really well together during this journey together. We seem to be agreed that what we're talking about is the right fit for you. Let me get the contract documents across to you. And of course, when you send the contract documents across, that's basically your conversion. Or you go straight into what the next steps are. You don't ask for the business. You're telling them the next steps to get them set up on the system are going to be this. And if you could just, sign off this PO for us or whatever it needs to be. So that again takes a bit of confidence in terms of the assumptive close. The second one, what time is it? 55. Cool.
That's fine, yeah.
So the second one, the summary close, which is also quite effective. So you've listened to what the pain points are, and if you to go on it and then explain, so by working with me, I can improve productivity, I can help reduce your costs, and I can give you peace of mind over overall service. Are you okay to go ahead? So you're surmising all the things that you're going to deliver. Are we okay to go ahead? Is another good summary close. One of the other closes I particularly like is something called the isolation close. The isolation close, again, you need to have built insight and intelligence on the prospect first about they're losing money here, or they're not getting the right stock delivered, or whatever it is, the pain point that you can solve. And I would literally say, okay, Stephen, so if I could resolve your challenge around stock availability, would you like to go ahead? So you're highlighting specifically one pain point that means a lot. That's why it's called an isolation close. Focus on that one thing that you know is going to make their life easier. Highlight it, say that I can help you with that. Would you like to go ahead? Those sorts of things. And there are plenty of others, and it involves mental gymnastics and whatever else. But those are some suggestions and my thoughts around closing.
No, that's been really, really helpful, Adam. As always, when we have you on our Lunch and Learns, I learn something myself. So it's, but I hope that our listeners, whether you're on LinkedIn, whether you're on Facebook or with us on Zoom this lunchtime, have really benefited from just going through that perfect pitch. And Adam, your contact details are on the screen. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, I know that you will welcome that conversation to be able to, to close, but welcome the opportunity to investigate and sort of identify how you can support them and take their business forwards as well. So anything you want to add on that, Adam?
We're a business community. These are, of course, depending on your viewpoint, tough times, depending on how you see it. There are companies who are scaling and thriving. Brilliant. But we are a community, and I do genuinely believe in paying forward, and I believe that it's good to support each other during what's going on. And so with that, this is no sell, genuinely no sell. But if anybody that's listening just wants to have an hour's conversation with me, with no ask, no agenda, see if I can add a bit of value to you, see if I can help you out, then I'm more than happy to do that. It's something that I've done before with you, Stephen, in terms of the Action Coach team. And I'm happy to continue extending that. So if you fancy just a casual chat, drop me a line.
Brilliant. Thank you, Adam. And likewise, we are part of the same business community, you and I, and we also extend absolutely the same offer to all our listeners and all our prospects. If you want to have that conversation with either myself or one of our coaches that, best fits the needs and the industry you're working in, we have a number of coaches here at Action Coach Birmingham and would happily, have that either a 20-minute or an hour conversation. We call it a free diagnostic conversation just to understand better the needs of your business and see how we can help you further. And I know that we've done that with each other, haven't we, Adam? And it's been a great time we've had together.
Oh, absolutely. I've gone through your 90-day business planning.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I've been the benefactor of that. Brilliant. Yeah. I can absolutely vouch for what you guys do.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Adam. And likewise, and just building on from that, we do have, people often think of coaching as being, mega expensive, can't afford it right now. I know times are tough. We know times are tough here at Action Coach Birmingham, but we do have, if people are interested, we have 30 videos, half an hour each. That's 15 hours of self-learning, 30 years of Brad Sugar's own business experience pulled together in 30 videos, 30 minutes a day, 30 days to work on your business. Now is the time to invest in yourself, to invest in your business, and to see how you can move it, which absolutely we can all do better at every aspect of our business, to see how you can move it forward. We've talked about sales this lunchtime. That is just one aspect that Brad covers, but he covers a lot more. He covers everything from marketing, from visions and planning, from systemization, looking at your finances. Absolutely brilliant set of videos, and it's just £30 a week to sign up. £25 plus the VAT, and if you're VAT registered, it's £25 because you can, of course, claim that back. But it's a great way to dip your toe into the water, see if coaching, see if getting that external support and building that resilience is right for you right now. And on top of that, Adam, we'd always say, if you don't get value, we'll give you every penny back. If you feel you're not getting value from the program. But we're so convinced in what we do here at Action Coach, as you are at Impact Sales Coaching. We know that any client that works with us is going to get value right from that first time we sit down together. Adam, bang on 1 o'clock. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real privilege having you for the second part. I think it's our last time together on Lunch and Learn before Christmas, unless we find another slot in the diary. But it's been great having you with us. On Monday next week, we have Jason Tidale another member of our business community who's going to be talking about websites and looking at how we can make those small changes to our websites to really improve on performance and use those as a great opportunity to increase our sales and prospects in our business. So we look forward to Jason at 1 o'clock on Monday. But for now, Adam, thank you again. Look forward to catching up with you very soon, hopefully in person, if not on Zoom in the very near future. But it'd be good to do that. And to all our listeners, thank you for joining us and have a great day. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Awesome, guys. Bye.